What up, everyone? Pat Mayo here with part 2 of the 2021 NFL mock draft first round today. Picks 11 through 32. We've already done the top 10. We ran long on that, so we separated into 2 videos. Fortunately, though, you can still smash the like button for this episode. In the comment section, give me your biggest bust in the first round. Of any player in the first round, who is going to be the biggest bust from this draft class? You want to find all of the teams. You're not interested in what Jacksonville is doing, but you care about what Baltimore does with their 2 picks. Hit the time codes for the video. You can find everything like that. Part 1 is already out, so you can go rewind, go check out Mayo Media Network, subscribe, by the way, and go check out that show as well. Thor and Ray are excellent on both of these shows. You really need to listen to what they got to say and just ignore all of my minimal commentary on all of this. But if you want to find the entire mock draft, go to dkplaybook.com. If you're listening to the audio version, rate, review, and subscribe. That is the currency that we deal with in the podcasting world, those ratings, those reviews, and the subscriptions. So please help us out on the Pat Mayo experience. And if you're looking for individual player profiles on receivers and running backs, already out. Draft props, already out. So hit up the Mayo Media Network. But picks 11 through 32, let's go.
Mayo experience.
Mayo experience. Mayo experience. Mayo experience. Experience.
We've done the first 10 picks of the mock draft so far. So we have Trevor Lawrence, Wilson, Mac Jones, Pitts, Sewell, Chase, and with Denver trading up 2 picks, taking Justin Fields. Carolina gets Slater. Now Detroit back gets Smith. And Dallas, Patrick Surtain. So that leaves us at number 11 on the clock is the New York Giants. Thor, we're going to speed this up a little bit now because we have a lot of picks left to go. Who are the Giants taking?
So some people have talked about like a receiver. I just don't see that with the money that they already put into that position this offseason, to add to the couple guys that they had coming back. So I don't see that for me. I would, if I'm them, I would look at the defense, specifically edge or cornerback. And if Slater fell down, maybe, especially because of Gettleman's fetish, with the trenches, but I'm not sure if Darrisaw is enough to convince them to sort of look away from the defense. So I think this is where you're either going to see the first edge guy off the board or perhaps Jaycee Horn. I think that Jaycee Horn is a better value at this spot. And so I'm going to go with Jaycee Horn for the Giants.
Ray, what are the Giants going to be doing with their pick at number 11 overall?
Yeah, I really, really want to say edge. I really want to say edge rusher, getting pressure on the quarterback. But in a division that's, Philadelphia is going to upgrade their passing attack. We've seen Washington, what they did with Curtis Samuel, and they've got Terry McLaurin in Dallas with that 3-headed monster of Lamb, Cooper, and Gallup. New York, they need a cornerback in the worst way. And, I think they're going to be happy if it's Jaycee Horn or Surtain. But right here, I think they make sort of a need/divisional need move, and they do take. I'm fine with Jaycee Horn here because it's either cornerback. They're not going wide receiver. They just brought in Galladay. They're not going receiver. So I'm fine with this pick of Jaycee Horn.
So Jaycee Horn goes to the Giants at number 11. After what we saw what Bradbury was able to do for them last year, they could have a pretty decent secondary moving forward in a division where you expect a lot of aerial shenanigans to be going on. So I like it. Number 12, Philly is up next, and Ray, all of a sudden, a receiver has dropped to them.
Yeah, and I don't think it's the receiver that they may have thought would drop here at pick 12. And I think part of Philadelphia will be not as happy or enthralled that Devonta Smith didn't make it to him at 12. But they'll pair Jalen Hurts up with another receiver that he played with in college, and they will take, if he's on the board, I think Jaylen Waddle right here. The slide for Waddle falls. It's kind of weird because, they've got these kind of, Jalen Reagor's not the biggest wide receiver. Doesn't fit the prototypical X role, even though he played there, which was kind of weird watching last year. Now you got Jaylen Waddle, who, they do similar things. Him and Jalen Reagor, they're damn near the same player. Now Waddle's got a lot more juice and more acceleration, but they're still these undersized slot speedsters that you just want to get their ball in their hands. Maybe they're not taking a quarterback here. There's no quarterback to take. They're going Jaylen Waddle here in this mock at 112.
So Waddle to Philly. Thor, do you agree?
I do. Yeah. I think, we talked before about why Miami got up to 6. So then you think about, what went on in Philly's head that, they would accept the future first round pick to move to 12. And I think, the idea was one of those two Alabama receivers is going to be here. If our best case scenario, we get to choose from both, but if nothing else, it really does seem like one will get here. And so in this case, you take Waddle, but Ray's point is very well taken. I think they would absolutely prefer Smith because there's a redundancy of skill set, or a redundancy of what Waddle and Raygor does. I don't think that nullifies, the idea of taking Waddle, but that really hurts Raygor. A lot of the things that they were projecting Raygor to do when Waddle's in the building, Raygor is going to be pushed way down the pecking order, and he's going to have to figure something out. He's going to have to start catching the ball, real quick, because he could be just viewed as superfluous really quickly. But because of the way that his rookie season went, that's a big part of the reason why the Eagles' top need by far is wide receiver. So you can't count on him. The book's still out, and I'm not giving up on Raygor. But in this scenario, this is a 3-headed receiver class for the Eagles. You might be getting calls at this point because Trey Lance, the way that we have it, he's still on the board. But I agree with Ray. I don't expect the Eagles to take a quarterback. It seems like if that was even in their head, they wouldn't have traded from 6 to 12. When that thing went down, that was their decision of, for 1 year we're going to put all the pieces around Hurts, as many as we can. And, I think a big part of that idea, again, was taking the receiver at 12. And so, even with a guy like Lance falling down, I don't think that they take him. And also, as far as a trade possibility, I also don't think that they would trade down again, because, again, where we are right here, it's just Waddle on the board. You trade down, he's going to be gone. So, so then, if you want to address the receiver thing, even 7-8 spots back, it's going to be like Bateman and Marshall and Kadarius Toney. There's a huge drop, so you have to take Waddle here.
Ray, do you think that this is an open season for a potential trade? It doesn't seem like Thor is leaning that way with whether or not they would trade back down again. But if you're building a team around Hurts, building an offense around Hurts, and let's not pretend like the Eagles defense was any good last year. It was not. So you could use some draft capital here if there's a lot that you would want to do, isn't there?
Yeah, but I agree with Thor. I really think they want to see. They're going to give Jalen Hurts every opportunity to give them reason to commit to him long term. I mean, this is a shot. 2021 is the Jalen Hurts show. Fade all the ridiculous stuff about open quarterback competition with Joe Flacco. It's Jalen Hurts. And in order to do laugh. In order to do that, you've got to give him weapons. And I was president of the Jalen Reagor fan club, and things did look good early on. I mean, by all accounts, he was fantastic in camp, but I mean, the Eagles fell apart from top to bottom. He was hurt, wasn't catching the ball. They're using him outside as this X wide receiver. I don't think they trade back. I think they're here at 12, knowing that they're going to get one of these 3 wide receivers. Well, not Chase, but Devonta Smith or potentially Jaylen Waddle. They're gonna take the wide receiver to help Jalen Hurts, to help them figure out if Jalen Hurts is really going to be the quarterback of the future.
Thor, that puts the Los Angeles Chargers on the clock. Is this a spot to get Justin Herbert some protection? And we already have 2 offensive linemen off the board. So what would be the gap between the top 2 and all the other O linemen here?
This is a very, going back to the trade thing, this would be a fascinating decision, because just like with the Eagles, we talked about, there was one guy left in that tier that they needed before it dropped off. If you're the Chargers looking at offensive line, and that's what they're sitting dead red on. And by the way, they need both. It's like the Vikings. They need multiple starters on the offensive line, not just one. And so in this case, you have Christian Darrisaw, who's fallen there, who's the last of the top 3 tackles. And Vera Tucker's still there. I don't consider him a tackle for reasons we can talk about when he ends up going. But those 2 guys are very good. You could pop one of them here, of course, and I think they would if they stayed in the slot. But they're going to get a lot of phone calls if Trey Lance or Fields, whichever one of the, if one of those guys ends up falling down, these teams in this alley are going to start to get a lot of phone calls, because this is where, whether it be New England, whether it be Chicago, whether it be Washington, the cost, Belichick is sort of, miserly with his picks anyway, but like the other teams, the cost to get into the top 10 from where they're sitting would be too prohibitive because Washington and Chicago are probably going to stink next year. You can't leverage yourself in the way that the Texans did by trading, even one future first round pick, because it may end up being the third pick, which is how the Dolphins turned that into multiple more first round picks, stuff like that. But like, again, I think the Chargers are going to get a lot of calls here. And I think a trade down would make sense. You're going to take a risk here, with the offensive lineman. And certainly if they've fallen completely head over heels in love with Christian Darrisaw, they would have to pop him. But if they have any question whatsoever, the Chargers have more needs than, again, just with the offensive line. I mean, there's more outside of that, but just on the offensive line, you have, at least two needs, right? We want two starters. So I think it would make a lot of sense to move down if you're willing to sacrifice Darrisaw, which is essentially what the thing is going to be. I'm going to propose another trade, Pat, if you don't mind.
Let's hear it.
Okay, so
who trades up?
I'm going to go with the Bears. So the Chargers, their pick at 13 is worth $11.50. The Bears is worth $8.50 at 20. The Bears can make that up with their second round pick. And so that, it's a pretty easy one there. Their second round pick is worth 380 points. You're going to have to pay, perhaps a little, it's like 80 points extra for that or whatever. But, that's the way these things work moving up in the draft. So the Bears trade their first and second round pick to the Chargers to move up to take a quarterback, and they're going to be taking Trey Lance.
Okay. Ray, do you think that they keep the pick? Because we can go with that, and we can go with an offensive lineman, but you can agree to this trade right now.
I agree with this trade. The only reason that I wouldn't is if Slater somehow fell to them.
Agreed.
I do think there's a tier break. And listen, there's some other offensive linemen that I like in this draft. I mean, we're talking about Darrisaw. I like Teven Jenkins. I like him a lot. He's a real nasty. I think he's probably better suited inside, but his size looks like he's going to play outside at a tackle spot, maybe right tackle. But here, I think the Chargers are probably bummed that Slater's not on the board. They trade back a little bit. They're still going to get one of those, second tier offensive linemen because they need the help. They desperately need the help up front. And the Bears, this is a perfect, Trey Lance is from that area. I know he's, that he's kind of closer to home. He's in a situation where he does not have to play right away. They've got the red rifle and Andy Dalton there to, at this point of his career, that's what he is. He's a bridge quarterback. Makes a ton of sense for the Bears, ton of sense for the Chargers to move back. So I would agree with this trade. Please, Judge Mayo, let the Commissioner Mayo, will you allow this to go through, Commish?
Well, here's the problem. I don't have my vaccine yet, so I can't hug all the people coming onto the stage like Roger Goodell, but I'll have to give like a social distance high five to Trey Lance, number 13 to the Chicago Bears after the trade. That is the pick. We're moving to number 14. Ray, now Minnesota's sitting there and there's still offensive linemen available. Maybe it's an edge rusher. I don't know.
Yeah, and for me, the way that I'm projecting the Vikings, they listen, Kurt's the quarterback. You got Dalvin at running back. You know what we have at wide receiver. I think they've got to do a better job up front. That offensive line is not very good. And, we heard Thor talk about a couple of guys. Darrisaw, I mentioned Teven Jenkins. I'm a big Teven Jenkins fan. So right here at the 14th pick, I do think Minnesota goes offensive lineman. Vera Tucker, not yet. I don't think I'd spend a top 15 pick on Tucker, even though I'm a USC Trojans fan. But Thor, I'm going to defer to you because I know that's your neck of the woods, brother. So you tell me which offensive lineman they're taking. But Commissioner Mayo, I'm calling in the card for Teven Jenkins, offensive lineman out of Oklahoma State.
So there's no truth to the rumors that I made that Chargers pick to allow one more offensive lineman to drop that. There's absolutely no rumors to that. That is erroneous and false. I think the Vikings would take, for me, I don't think that I don't think that Jenkins is a fit for what they do. They fetish in terms of offensive line. There's arguably no team in the NFL that fetishizes athleticism more than the Vikings. Like if you look at their just the RAS scores and the SPARQ scores of the guys that they've picked, it's basically like you can almost disqualify, like below a certain threshold. Brian O'Neill's a good example. Ezra Cleveland's a good example. Brad Berry's a good example. And then, even going back before, even Kubiak was in there, this is back to like the Willie Beavers those kind of guys, the big time TJ Clemens, Vikings fans are like breaking out in hives knives right now when I'm talking about this. But because of that, it's like the sort of Mauler dude, that's not quite as athletic. They haven't really done that, for a little while. And even on the interior, Pat Elflein was like the last least, non-athletic offensive lineman they took, in my memory. And I think after that, Kubiak's like, we're not doing that ever again. Like I'm commandeering when we pick offensive linemen. I think that Darrisaw did not work out at his pro day. He's not, as far, again, going back into that sort of thing that the Vikings fetishize, he's not exactly it, as far as that sort of a dude. But he is not non-athletic. And he's proven that he can play left tackle. He did it for 3 years at Virginia Tech. He was like an overlooked recruit, and he came in after 1 year in not a boarding school. He was in what do you call it? The year between high school and college. And, he did that. And then he shows up at Virginia Tech and locks down the left tackle job for 3 years. What would be good about that for the Vikings is if he can hang there, in their system, that allows you to keep Brian O'Neill on the right side. And it also allows you, Ezra Cleveland, to keep him at right guard. I don't know what the Vikings are thinking as far as Ezra Cleveland, if they want to try him at tackle, but they've seemed to want to keep Brian O'Neill at right tackle, as opposed to moving him to left. And so, Darrisaw, I mean, the way that I would see that, I would want O'Neill on the left and Darrisaw on the right, and use Darrisaw to run behind more, which Darrisaw made. We're not going to talk about Khalil Herbert on this show because he's like a fourth round pick or whatever, but a running back from Virginia Tech that Darrisaw made a crap ton of money for this year, just caving in, left sides. And so I'm going to go with Darrisaw, but I will say that Vera Tucker will also be very attracted to them for the reasons that I said. But if they, if it's sitting dead red on the left tackle, it has to be Darrisaw, because Vera Tucker proved last season against Kayvon Thibodeau in the Pac-12 title game, sort of the opposite of what Rashawn Slater did in his encounters with Chase Young, that he can't handle the stretched out athletic freaks on the edge. So if the Vikings want a left tackle, it's got to be Darrisaw.
All right, I will defer to the guy who is close to the situation in Minnesota and go. It's like we go with Ray when it's a Dallas pick. We'll go with Thor when it's a Minnesota pick. It's going to be Darrisaw to the Vikings at number 14. Thor, that's back on the clock for you. Number 15. Every mock I've seen has New England taking a quarterback, but there's no quarterbacks left to pick in ours.
Yeah, not unless you want to take Kelly-Bond or something. We're certainly not going to do that to the Patriots fans on this show. But yeah, after that, and by the way, Pat, I know you're a gambling guy. Just something for people out there that look into this stuff. The odds that you could, on like when the rumors were like, New England can move up for a quarterback and they're still there. You can bet a prop of them trading down as opposed to up, and you can get very, very good odds on that. And last season, New England was in a very similar spot as far as their quarterback position, and they traded down. They ended up taking Duggar. So I think it's far more likely that New England ends up trading down than up. However, like here, there's not an obvious trade thing that comes to mind. Again, all the quarterbacks off the board. I think they look at receiver, that it being one position. It's one that they tried to address in the first round with N'Keal Harry. That hasn't worked out the best so far. I think that's one position they'd look at. I think two other ones, defensive backfield in general, and then linebacker as well. So Micah Parsons has started to fall down the board here. Bill back in the day would take like a shot on one character dude, like, per off season, remember Corey Dillon, like that, Randy Moss one year, like, but there's like one, right? And I don't know if Bill has taken his character guy yet, his character project dude, but this would be a dang good time to start if he needs one for, this coming season or whatever. Micah Parsons is, as talented as you get, essentially for a linebacker, everything. Like, his 2019 tape was the best season. I think of just off-ball linebacker play in this class. And then also at his pro day, he proved that, athletically, just a ridiculous freak. Not only can he take care of all the off-ball stuff, you can also sick him off the edge. New England, again, they're going to have to figure out their coverage stuff. And as far as that's the one area of Parsons' game that I'm not sure of. What I do know is he's decent in zone, but they just didn't put him in man coverage very much, in part because you can just sick him off the edge, on passing downs or whatever. And so I think at this point, another guy that I love is Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, which we could talk about in a second, who feels more like a New England kind of dude. But this might be a scenario where New England's just like, we've gotten a gift. Micah Parsons, in any other scenario without these off-field things, and what I'm talking about is hazing incidents from earlier in his college career that got quite bad. There was at least one guy that had to transfer away from Penn State because of it. He accused James Franklin of trying to cover the whole thing up. It wasn't good. Hairy situation there. So like, I do think it is legitimate to, at least know Micah Parsons and, try to ascertain for yourself, was that a like a sort of a big man on campus who's super duper immature, or was that something that is indicative of his character and being a bad teammate? Because it very well may be. And if that's the case, I don't think that New England would take him. I think they'd take Owusu-Koramoah. But if they feel decent about their interactions with Micah Parsons at this point, I think this would make a ton of sense. So just for the, the fortuitousness of Parsons falling down here, of the positions that New England needs, I think, this would be considered a steal, at least on draft day. And if Micah Parsons keeps his head straight for Bill Belichick, he could go to the Hall of Fame. I mean, that's what the ceiling is, a very, very high ceiling.
Ray, this is such a confusing pick, especially, even if the quarterback is available for them at 15, Lord knows what the Patriots are going to do. Trade down, probably very much in the playbook for them. But can you get on board with Parsons to New England, or you got someone else?
I was over here like pumping my arms in jubilation because I'm 110% on board with Micah Parsons. A gift has fallen in the laps of the New England Patriots. It not only makes sense, and when you look at the linebackers the Patriots have had over the years, right, there are these big athletic guys that can kind of play all over the field. I'm talking about Dante Hightower. Richard Seymour was this edge outside linebacker, defensive tackle, kind of can use him all over the field. Parsons is going to be he's a chess piece, but not as ambiguous as Isaiah Simmons was a couple of years ago for the Cardinals. And if we're being frank here, I think Michael Parsons, from a talent perspective, and I'm going to be conservative, top 7, top 8 talent as far as what he can do athletically at the position. He's an absolute monster. If it weren't for those off-field issues, the hazing allegations, I don't think we'd even be talking about Parsons here at 15. And even the day of the draft, that's why I keep calling it a gift. If he's there at 15, that is a gift for the Patriots. And it also fits in the AFC East. All titles run through the Buffalo Bills. And what do the Buffalo Bills have at quarterback? Just a freak of an athlete that's just running all over the place. They need somebody that can potentially try to contain that. And Micah Parsons, I guarantee we would see him spy Josh Allen at times when they face each other twice a year and potentially a third time in the playoffs. So I am on board with this pick of Micah Parsons at 15.
Now on to pick number 16. Arizona was rumored to be one of the teams potentially trading up to maybe go get a receiver into the top 10, but that has not happened in our mock draft. So Ray, at 16, who are the Cardinals taking?
Yeah, they're going to try to replace Patrick Peterson, and I think listen, Caleb Farley, health concerns, converted wide receiver. I like his skill set, but I think Greg Newsome and his rise throughout this pre-draft process can't go understated. He's a smooth athlete at the cornerback position. Not the most aggressive tackler at the cornerback position, but ultimately I want my damn cornerback to cover guys and not hit. You got DK Metcalf in that division, Matt Stafford coming in. I think Arizona has to shore up their pass receiving defenders room. So I think Greg Newsome here at 16, maybe a lot higher than people thought initially coming into this draft, but his rise has been meteoric throughout this process. So I'm going to take Greg Newsome, the second cornerback out of Northwestern.
So the Northwestern product, Thor, to the Cardinals. Do you have anyone else in mind?
So where I agree with Ray, defensive backfield for sure. You have to be sitting on that. If you're the Cardinals, they just need it badly. It's sort of like Dallas, in terms of that. I think Jaycee Horn would have been the absolute slam dunk, but that best case scenario did not happen for them here. I'm going to go with Farley though. Ray alluded to Newsome's, meteoric rise. Farley in some ways has had the opposite, no fault of his own. He didn't, he was one of the opt-outs last season, and he has a back issue that has, he got it in a freak weightlifting deal after the year that he tore his ACL. So as a true freshman, he was going to start on Virginia Tech as a receiver. He showed up there as an athlete and he was just torching people in the spring game. As a true freshman, he enrolled early. And Joseph Kwity is like, we found something. And so he was going to be a starter till he ripped up his knee in August of that year. And then he came back And in the summer, he had this freak weightlifting thing he played through it. He's a very, very tough kid. But it's cropped up at a couple different times. These things can go either way. We've seen players where it wrecks their career essentially. We've seen other guys that are able to have long careers with it, or that it doesn't come back, or whatever. Like Farley just had this microdiscectomy. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Procedure right before Virginia Tech's pro day. So that's why he couldn't, partake in that or whatever, but went to the Indy combine, rechecks or whatever. And they gave him the thumbs up. So at least for right now, he's good, but again, the back is, it's like with recurring concussions where, in terms of like, you start to get concerned that it could. However, just in terms of upside, Farley might have the highest ceiling of any defender, like maybe just south of Parsons. We were talking about like him but I would put his ceiling, I think, even a little bit above Surtain's. But there's the injury concern, and he's only played 2 seasons. But that last season, you started to see sort of everything start to coalesce. He's a big kid. He's ludicrously athletic. And he took to the position that second year that, the first year, you were seeing different things like especially the ball skills. In terms of playing the ball, Farley was just one of the best, collegiate guys and maybe the best one, but in the NFL, he's immediately going to be one of the premier ball hawks, just in terms of getting hands on balls and coming down with them and then being able to take an explosive play the other way. You see the receiver thing. You see why Justin Fuente, even though he had a future first-round quarterback just sitting there, he was going to play him at receiver until he ended up getting injured and then came back as a corner because they'd had other receivers, the Virginia Tech that had risen up by that point. But anyway, just as far as like the full package of a defender and a guy that I think Cliff Kingsbury is, would sort of fetishize, as an explosive defensive playmaker. I think that they would roll the dice here. And just speaking to Newsome really quick, as far as the meteoric rise that Ray mentioned, coming into this season, he would have been probably a 7th round pick, 6th maybe at best. He also may have been a UDFA. His first couple of seasons as starter was not as good as some of these other guys. And then last year he took off. Newsome did, and this began the meteoric rise that Ray talked about before his pro day in March. If you look at Benjamin Robinson's Mocking the Draft, or his website where he pumps all the mock draft data in, and then he finds sort of like, where they're being projected, like, from 1,000 different mock drafts or whatever, and then sort of charts it like throughout the process. Newsome was like 98th on that board before his mid-March pro day, and he jumped to 25 very quickly after it, because what had happened is Newsome played 6 games and 6 games only in the fall for Northwestern and had done very good. Obviously, like, he may have even given up less than 100 yards receiving last year in those 6 games. So he had that, but like he was playing in the zone. Northwestern plays zone coverage under their longtime defensive coordinator who retired right after the season, but it's mostly to mitigate issues in space of the defensive backs that Northwestern is typically able to get. But because of that system, we didn't get to see Newsome moving laterally as much, and also down the field, because in his snaps where he was impressed, teams just did not go at him this year. In the few times that he was in those situations, we didn't even get to see his long speed very much. He answered all those questions at the pro day. He tested as 93rd percentile type athlete. He's a very smart kid as well. My concern about him, this is sort of like the Zach Wilson thing. To me, Greg Newsome is the Zach Wilson of the cornerback class, because before he wasn't very good. Wilson was better in his initial 2 seasons than Newsome was. Newsome was not good his initial couple of seasons. Last season, dominant, absolutely dominant, tape statistically, etc. But Northwestern had a top 3 pass defense last year. They had one safety behind him that we're going to be talking about next year, the year after. Just an absolute ball hawk who had 6 interceptions, 8 games. He was PFF's highest graded coverage safety. And Northwestern had slot cornerbacks that played half as much as Newsome, that had similar PFF grades to Newsome. Northwestern's defense last year was sort of the high tide that rises all boats or whatever. And so Newsome had that going for him. And then the second thing is he didn't face basically any NFL talent last year. He got Garrett Wilson for like 10 plays before he got injured in the Ohio State game. And before that, the only guy he faced was with David Bell from Purdue. Rondale was hurt at that time. So he got Bell, but, again, he was out of there in the Ohio State game, like 10 plays, into that game. So didn't face him. And then he was out for the bowl game against Auburn, where he would have gotten to face a receiver, whether it was Seth Williams or Anthony Schwartz, but he was out for that game. So he was dominant in this period against really no one. And so that's my concern for him, that your sample size of playing really well, it's a 6-game sample against one good receiver. And then, before that, he just wasn't, as good. So, and the situation he was in was very advantageous. My concerns with him in terms of that are just as, big or whatever as my concerns with Farley and his back, which is Farley's only issue. And so because of that, I rank Newsome lower. And again, specifically speaking to this team, because this isn't, I'm not making, we're projecting who we think that they would. I think Kingsbury in that brass and sort of like, weighing these two things against each other, I think that they're going to go sort of with the devil they know, and Cliff Kingsbury's his sort of fetish, which is explosive players with, big time athleticism in bigger packages. I think that they would go with Farley over Newsome.
All right. I have a different take on Arizona's front office from this. I think they take the path of least resistance, don't want to fuck around with someone whose back could be a bit wonky. So I'm going to go with Ray and go with Newsome with the pick to Arizona, thus leaving the door open, Thor, for you in Las Vegas to potentially take someone with huge upside and injury downside.
Yes. So yes, I think, with the way that the board has gone, Farley would be extremely attractive here, extremely attractive. There's another guy that I don't know if they're going to be able to turn him down. I don't know if specifically Mike Mayock, and that, Gruden and pumping each other up, if this guy falls there, I don't know if they can turn him down. And that's Owusu-Koramoah. Farley would make it really difficult if he was there too, because you wouldn't expect him to be there, and he wouldn't be there were it not for the back thing. But I'm going to go with Owusu-Koramoah because he not only sort of appeals to Mayock and Gruden's, he's a hitman on the field and everything like that, but he's also a blue blood. He has from a blue blood school. I mean, at Notre Dame, he has a lot of characteristics that Mayock has honed in on, and I think he not only offers you that old school thing of like, again, the enormous hits and, we're bringing the Raiders back, to toughness or whatever, but he would also appeal to sort of the younger sect of Gruden's defensive staff that sees him as this nullifying chess piece. He's awesome in the box, like the biggest hits in college football. His hits are so ridiculous that the Athletic, Pete Sampson for the Athletic, actually put out a query looking for a math guy if he could explain the force of Koramoah's hits, and he actually got one from a Notre Dame grad that was teaching something at the Naval Academy, or he was a professor in math or whatever, and he actually made out a mathematical equation to explain Owusu-Koramoah's hitting, which I just got a big kick out of. But he's better in coverage, so he's good in the box, even though he's an undersized guy, because he has length, he's got twitch, and then when he gets there, and he gets there a lot, because not only those things, he snaps, his trigger is so fast. You got the itchy trigger finger coming downhill, so he screws up the angles of the offensive lineman, how quickly he can get there. And when he gets to the running back, he not only does he lay the hammer every time, he doesn't miss. He has super duper long arms, and wraps up every single time. But again, in coverage, he's arguably even better. He's a guy that legitimately erases people in the slot. And in the NFL, we've been talking about Kyle Pitts, and he's obviously sort of the most grand version of this, that we've seen coming to the NFL. But the thing of spacing out your offense, putting the receivers in space, having one sort of move tight end guy there in conjunction with the inline guy, that creates various issues for the defense, because you have the two bigger dudes on the field. You can run the ball against thin boxes, number one, but also just the opportunity it gives you to put athletes in space on the outside, et cetera. That's where the game is moving offensively, and it has been here for the last decade plus. Because of that, the value of guys, these defensive chess pieces, where your base is an off ball, but we can also put you in the slot to shut down any of those matchup issues. Where we have the shorter cornerback, like he's going to have X assignments, but whenever this dude is in the slot, Koramoah, you're going out there, we're going to replace you with some, doing those things. Like, He just offers the defense so much, and the flash plays and the toughness and all that sort of stuff. It just seems like something that would appeal to the Raiders to the degree that they might eschew what, at this point, Farley, some people would see that as an obvious thing. And I love Farley, as I just mentioned. But Mayock, if we know one thing about him from the last couple of years, is he sticks with his read specifically in the first round, and he doesn't care. But this is actually a pick that would make sense in the slot, unlike most of his other first round picks to this point. But it also just fits with what he looks for. So I'm going to go with Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah.
Ray, do you agree on this, or is there some sort of receiver who runs like a 3.9 40 that they can draft in this spot?
Well, luckily for the Raiders, JOK is a hell of an athlete in his own right, so it checks that box for them to have the athletic player, although he won't be catching the ball. He's one of the best pass coverage linebackers in this class. The impact of the hits that he has. I mean, they took a guy like Jonathan Abrams because he was physical. I mean, he fits. I mean, they had a guy like the safety from West Virginia, the little safety, Carl Joseph was a big impact hitter. I mean, listen, scout the player, not the helmet, but sometimes, damn it, the helmet just fits, and the Raiders like these hard-nosed kind of players. It's the Raiders way, and Mayock and all of that shit. I think if JOK is sitting there, I actually am kind of pissed off because I was thinking about taking him with the Dolphins next selection. But if he's on the board at 17, I do think it makes a good fit for the division that they play in, for the Raiders team with Max Crosby. You add him to Abrams, you add to that defensive line. I think it makes a lot of sense for the Raiders, for the Las Vegas Raiders to make that pick. So I like it.
All right, Ray, we're going to give you one last pick on this one before you have to take off. We're going to go with Miami, their second pick, and this pick is just yours. So whatever you say goes for Miami with this pick.
So here goes the time zone thing. The time zone thing, Mayo. I'm good for an hour. I'm at like 4:30 my time.
We're good then.
So
no, I am retracting my exclusivity to your pick on just for Miami. But you're still up on this one. Who is Miami going to take with their second pick?
There we go. I know a lot of people want them to take a running back, but it seems like the front office and every move that they made is strategic. It's smart. And the smart move is not to take a running back here at 18, as much as I love Najee Harris. So I think they're going to listen. When you look at the Dolphins defense, they've got a pretty damn good defense. Their defensive backfield isn't bad. It's pretty damn good. Xavier Howard, Byron Jones, I know McCain is out there. I do think they need some help on their defensive line. And I think they might stay in state and take Jaylen Phillips, the defensive end out of Miami. Just when you're just talking about raw, freaky athletes, the kid was a high 5-star recruit coming out of high school, played in Miami. The Dolphins have this pick. And again, I'm thinking about the division in which they play in, the AFC East. You've got to get players that are going to pressure the quarterback. Emmanuel Ogbah is okay in that department, but I think a player like Jaylen Phillips, even though he's raw and it may take him some time to develop, what he can do from day one, putting his hand in the ground and exploding off of the line of scrimmage, I think it makes a lot of sense for the Dolphins. They've already shored up their pass catchers with Jamar Chase early in the draft, and they did sign Will Fuller. I completely forgot that they do have Will Fuller there to complement Devontae Parker. So I think it makes a lot of sense for them to focus on the defensive side of the ball. If they don't, I can see them focusing on the line, but on the offensive side. But right here, I'm going Jaylen Phillips, linebacker, Miami. I'm defensive end, Miami.
Jaylen Phillips to Miami, Thor. Do you think this makes a lot of logical sense? And I do agree with Ray about not a running back for the Dolphins here, just based on what they've done with all their draft capital. It leads me to believe that they know what they're doing. And it's not to take anything away from any of the running backs in this draft class, but they might just realize like, hey, our draft capital is better spent off on a running back in the 4th round, not right here.
I agree with that. Yeah. And these days, typically when you see that flyer in the running back, the end of the 1st round, it's a team that's right on that precipice or already has been, they're championship contenders, right? And the Chiefs, are a great example of that with Edwards-Helaire. And they even in their explanation sort of alluded to this, where it was just like, we felt good with the rest of our roster. So we asked Pat, which his favorite running back of the class was, and he said Clyde. I mean, like, that's sort of how they explained that pick. And it's like, you can only get to that point when your roster is really, really, really good. Miami absolutely could get, to the point where they get into that luxury spot where that would would make sense because of, how well they've done all this. Laremy Tunsil trade, we talked about that before, has sprouted all of these first round picks. It's this gift that keeps on giving. It's like when Mario hits the thing and all the coins start going out, was what the Laremy Tunsil trade turned into for them. And so like you have all this equity and they've done a good job to this point filling it. And so you have to keep doing it. You still have a few holes though. And so like that's how I would do this. Maybe next year your roster is good enough that if you're sitting there at 28th spot, if you had a really good season, then you could be like, okay, we'll take a running back here. But I agree, this is too high and it doesn't make sense for where they are, in sort of the contention window hierarchy or whatever. So yeah, I'm not going to go running back. I agree that it would be edge for me because you took care of the wide receiver thing first. So that's cross that off the list of needs. Edge is the obvious one right after that. I rank Kwity Paye just like 2 or 3 spots ahead of Phillips, but the only reason it's like going back to the Farley thing. It's just past injury things. In Phillips's case, he had a couple concussions. He had one from his playing days earlier on, and then he had this scooter accident where he suffered another concussion. And this is when he was at UCLA. He might have been the top recruit overall in his class. If he wasn't, he was top 3. Which just this super duper ballyhooed edge rushing recruit. And anyway, he was medically retired by UCLA. Their doctor said, these issues are bad enough that you shouldn't play again. And Phillips ended up, changing, he went along with, he retired, but then he ended up changing his mind, transferred to Miami. And this past season in particular, you saw the thing that the recruiting analysts were seeing before, because it all started to sprout out. Ray mentioned that he's a sick athlete. Not only was that, sort of known, but he also proved the concept at his pro day workout. He tested just slightly under the 99th percentile, 98. He was 98.7 as a size adjusted athlete. So he's a freak athlete. It's not just that he's one of those built in a lab types. If you were building an edge rusher, it'd look a lot like him. And he also has advanced moves. He's got a couple different moves that he throws on guys, and the length, the athleticism, and then sort of the cleverness there, on the attack. It's a lot. It was a lot for ACC tackles to deal with, and it's going to be a lot at the next level too. Again, like he and Paye are very close and very different sort of evaluations, but they're close enough here, especially because of the local flavor. That I agree with the position thing, and I also agree with Ray. Let's do the homecoming here and keep Jaylen Phillips in Miami. It has worked out to him at this point. Ever since he moved to Miami, his career has taken off. Let's keep him there.
All right, so Jaylen Phillips to Miami with the second pick at number 18, which does make a lot of sense as well because you have all this draft capital and your defense is already good. This seems like a roll the dice luxury upside pick for them too, to go get that guy that can hassle a quarterback based on what the rest of your defense looks like as well and how close you're at least perceiving yourself and even the outside perceives you to be to potentially taking that next step if Tua can come along for the ride. So that leaves Washington, number 19 on the clock. Thor, what's the pick?
Yeah. So, obviously there's been a lot of talk about Washington with the quarterbacks in the way that this went down. That's obviously not going to happen. You could look for another receiver, a complement to McLaren. For me, the NFL might see this differently, but I see Rashod Bateman as absolutely the number 4 receiver, and I think that he would be fine in this slot. But again, the NFL might be lower. Another option I think would be Teven Jenkins, and I think they would take one of the 2 linebackers if either of them fell here, but they didn't in this thing. Just because I'm bullish on Rashod Bateman, and I know that others are going to be. Not everyone in the NFL is, but Washington absolutely could be, and a guy that would be a very good complement for McLaren. 2 guys that create separation, just getting out of bed, as far as their footwork off the line and all that sort of stuff, and just great route runners, both of them. Their quarterback situation for the future is not set yet, but with a guy like Rashod Bateman, you take care of a really big need, and a guy that'd be a great compliment to McLaren, and then sort of set the table for the next quarterback coming in. I'm going to go with Rashod Bateman.
So throwing out the 4th receiver off the board, Bateman to the Washington Footballs, Ray. Do you think that because they don't get a quarterback, at least in our mock draft, that now is the time to utilize some of this high-end draft capital on protecting the future number 1 guy? So when he comes in, all of a sudden he's just not, he has all these weapons potentially with Bateman and McLaren and Curtis Samuel, who they just picked up, and Gibson coming back in the backfield. Like, that's a really nice spot to walk into. But if you can't protect him, then it's another lost season at that point.
Yeah, and Thor threw out the name Teven Jenkins, a player that I talked about, a couple of picks ago. I think Vera Tucker, did we take him, or is he still on the board?
He's
still on the board. I think a lot of those tackles make sense. I do agree with Thor that they're going to go wide receiver. They need the help. They were throwing to guys like Steven Sims, Cam Sims. When you're throwing to the Sims twins, that's not a good thing. And they seem to be enamored with these tweener like prospects, these hybrid players. Curtis Samuel, wide receiver, running back. Antonio Gibson, wide receiver, running back. And there's a wide receiver sort of former quarterback and dynamic slot guy in this class that's getting a lot of first round draft capital buzz. Kadarius Toney, I think we can't rule that out, but I am going to roll with Thor because Bateman is a far superior wide receiver prospect than Kadarius Toney. Tony's probably going to go round 1, and if he's drafted over Rashod Bateman, that's going to be a mistake. So I would like to think that, we talk their defense is really good. The football team, I mean, their defensive line is scary good. They've got to do some stuff on offense, but I just think that the positional value at O tackle, they can wait a little bit. O tackle, O guard. Grab Rashod Bateman. I'm fine with Thor.
All right, so Bateman to the footballs at number 19. Now, the Bears have traded the number 20 pick in our mock draft to the Los Angeles Chargers, who are now on the clock, Ray, at number 20. Is this a spot where, we had them potentially either taking a tackle or trading back last time? They traded back, and now only one more tackle has gone off the board since.
Yeah, and listen, having watched a lot of USC football, I do not think Vera Tucker is a left tackle for the NFL. I don't. But he's extremely athletic, and I know the Los Angeles Chargers have done a lot of homework on this kid. And he's a player that I think could potentially even go top 15. So for him to fall here to pick 20, it's going to be one of these offensive linemen. You still got Alex Leatherwood on the board. You've got Creed Humphrey at center. They really don't need a center. You've got other players, but I think the athleticism, we talked about this hometown flavor. I mean, I know it sounds crazy, but some of these NFL GMs are a little more predictable than we think. So I think having a close look at Vera Tucker, it makes sense for him to play and fit in somewhere along that offensive line with an athletic quarterback like Justin Herbert. So right here, we're going to go with Mr. Vera Tucker, offensive lineman. I'm just going to say lineman out of USC.
And that actually makes sense based on what you said earlier, Thor, about how there's many needs on the Chargers offensive line, that just getting a high-end athlete to plug in one of those gaps and then figure out the rest later could be the move.
Exactly. And this is the best case scenario with the trade down that we did. We talked about if both we know that the Vikings are going to take an offensive lineman right behind you, but if another one goes off and then maybe two, then it starts to get a little hairy for you as far as first round type guys. But this is the best case scenario. Only one guy did. Before, we were between Vera Tucker and Darrisaw with their pick. Vera Tucker just fell to us here, and we got the extra second round pick. What's beautiful about that is this class is actually pretty rich in second round tackles. It starts that class falls off, a little bit after that, but I really like this tackle class. Both in the first round, it's really, really good. But again, those second tier guys, a bunch of athletic guys that proved it on the field over multiple years. Brady Christensen, I mentioned, at the highest, PFF grade, whatever, and then proved to be a stud athlete. He was 90 percentile plus. Dylan Raid and Samuel Cosme. And we can toss these names out. Those guys are going to be the second round type tackles. We get one of those guys for free, merely because we traded down with the Bears, and we get one of the two dudes that we wanted anyway. So this is a bonanza in the Chargers draft room. Completely agree with Ray. This would be Vera Tucker. It is such an easy pick. You're keeping him local. He's the best offensive lineman left. And whereas for some other teams, and I agree with Ray as well, that I don't see him as a tackle for the reasons that I mentioned before. But for the Chargers, it doesn't matter, because they, again, a team like the Vikings, they need multiple starters. So you get Vera Tucker is going to take one of your interior spots that you need a starter at. And in the second round, now we got 2 second round picks, if we need to maneuver. But certainly we're, with one of those picks, even staying put, we're going to be able to get a starting tackle. So we're going to go with Elijah Vera Tucker here.
All right. That means that Indianapolis is now on the clock at number 21. Do they, Thor, go back to offensive line here? And Ray had thrown out Teven Jenkins a little bit earlier. Is this a decent landing spot for him?
I do. Yeah. I'm going to go with Teven Jenkins here. I think tackle is the biggest need. And, Jenkins is that four guy, there, for me, there's a little bit of a drop, but like Jenkins is clearly on the four. It's sort of like what I was talking about with Bateman in relation to the receiver class. So, with the Colts, you might not want to get, too cute with this pick. I mean, certainly they would look at an edge rusher as well, because the way that the board has fallen, Kwity Paye would be, I think, very attractive to the Colts here as well. But just like the offensive line needs to get addressed. And I just think that's a position when you have that big of a need and a guy falls there that, makes sense in that slot, you take him. Teven Jenkins will start for him right away. And he's going to start for them for a long time.
Ray, do you think that they go offensive lineman, receiver, or potentially other?
Yeah, they've got to go O-line. I agree with the selection. Listen, you've got Jonathan Taylor, you've got Carson Wentz, you've got, this division that they play in. I think offensive line makes a lot of sense. Receiver, they got Michael Pittman, they re-signed T.Y. Hilton, they second round tendered Zach Pascal. So I think they're pretty set, at least for first round draft capital for a wide receiver. So I like it a lot here at for the offensive lineman.
Okay, so that makes it pretty easy on my end. Teven Jenkins to the Indianapolis Colts. Number 22, Ray, is the Tennessee Titans. I had Elliot Christ on the draft prop show, and it was the time that we spoke, 6-1 that Tennessee would draft a defensive player with their pick. I don't know why it's that high, but I have to feel like they're in the market for an edge rusher, potentially, maybe some back end help. Just because one of your wide receivers leaves doesn't mean you all of a sudden just go out and draft another receiver. Now, sometimes it does, granted, but I think that defense is very much on the board here for the Titans.
Yeah, this is not fantasy football. I mean, they're trying to win. They're trying to win games here. And I think two gifts have fallen to Tennessee. And I don't believe that, when it's all said and done, I know we've done this exercise. I don't think Kwity Paye, if Kwity Paye it makes it to pick 22, I mean, I would assume that Vrabel and company would rush to the draft board to turn that pick in. Now, Paye's still on the board for us, right, Thor? Because you let me have Jaylen Phillips.
Yep.
I think Caleb Farley, Kwity Paye make a ton of sense for the Titans organization. But I think we could see Kwity go as high as pick 11 to the New York Giants. So to fall to 22 to Tennessee, they just lost Clowney. Again, we're talking about the division in which they play, the AFC. You got to get pressure on these quarterbacks. I think they would run to the damn podium to turn in the card for Kwity Paye, the edge out of Michigan.
Kwity Paye, good name, so that goes a long way in branding, Thor. Do you like the pick?
Yeah, and I agree with everything that Ray said. Two gifts have fallen to you at two positions of enormous need. This is the scenario where the Titans are doing backflips at the war room kind of a thing, because either Farley or Kwity Paye are slam dunks, picks for Tennessee at this point. And here you get to choose between the two. It's two guys that probably should have gone a little bit above, but there's these few questions with Farley. It's with regards to his back, and with Paye, he's still raw, right? But I mean, in terms of the athletic package, it's absolutely ridiculous. Pat, I love to, would you have to do the picks? We can get you in. So I'm going to force the tiebreaker here, and I'm going to give him Caleb Farley.
I'll give them the edge rusher in this scenario, and I will go with Ray because I already wrote it on my sheet because I thought you were agreeing. So pay the man. He's in. He's going to the Tennessee Titans, which leaves us Thor at number 23, the New York Jets' second pick. Who is the shittiest player possible that's plausible at this pick? Because the Jets will take them.
Yeah, so obviously they got Zach Wilson with their first pick. Very similar needs to what we were just talking about with the Titans. It's cornerback and edge, and they get the other gift, right? The one with above them. Caleb Farley's still there. He should have been off the board by this point. I mentioned before that, and Ray agrees with me that Zach Wilson, we don't have him in the second slot, but certainly for Caleb Farley, getting him, at 22 or wherever we are, that's a steal. Whoever you are, as long as his back is, as long as it doesn't wreck his career, that will make him a steal at this slot, and it fills a big need for them. We talked about cornerback last year as being one of their big needs, but offensive line obviously was a huge one as well. And the guy that fell to them, they could start him, Becton could start him right, at tackle right away. But because of that, they weren't able to address the defensive backfield in the way that they probably would have even liked. It was interesting actually in the UDFA range last year, they signed 3 of the top UDFA cornerbacks like right afterwards. And I think that was sort of an acknowledgement of like, man, we really wish we could have, taken a quarterback, but it's just the board didn't fall to us that way. This year, it absolutely has. Caleb Farley is an absolute steal here.
So Caleb Farley to the Jets, Ray. That makes a lot of sense because he has back problems, and maybe that being a year out of football has severely impacted his overall upside. And if you have those negatives and you get drafted by the Jets, I feel bad for the guy, but he may never play in the NFL.
Yeah. Here's the thing, though. I mean, when he's so raw and so young, he was a converted wide receiver. The ball skills are there. The size is there. If he can stay healthy, I mean, you're looking at a solid cornerback for you. I'm not going to call him some all pro. I'm not calling him a pro bowler, but and they lost, who's the kid from USC that they drafted in the first round? They just lost him, I believe, Adoree Jackson, right? So I think it makes a lot of sense for them to take Farley, even with the bad back.
All right, so Caleb Farley goes to the Jets with the second pick. I know that Superfan, as revealed on the prop show, Tim Andercuss really wanted Asante Samuel Jr. because he saw 30 seconds of highlight clips and said there could be no one better. So this is actually, people who actually watch these people, this probably makes a little bit more sense, and shoot for that upside with the second pick that you have in the first round, much like Miami did in our mock draft at least. So Ray, that puts Pittsburgh on the clock. People are rumoring, obviously, a running back goes to Pittsburgh because James Conner isn't there anymore, but does Pittsburgh have enough sense to maybe address some other position here and go get another running back down the list? Because it's not like they have this, they drafted Rashod Mendenhall at one point in time, but I feel like that was over a decade ago, that maybe a second round running back or a third round running back does them just as good here, and they can solidify the rest of their positions, especially on defense where they lost some guys.
I mean, Mayo, this is the NFL draft. This isn't reason and sound logic here that you're dishing out, because that does not happen during the NFL draft, right? They lost Maurkice Pouncey. They had one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL after, being so dominant for time. And as Thor alluded to, there are a lot of really good offensive linemen. I like Creed Humphrey a lot. And I know a lot of people may say that, he's, that's too high to take Creed Humphrey. Losing Maurkice Pouncey, you've got to replace the captain of your offensive line. Creed Humphrey should be the pick. But in this mock, they are going to take Najee Harris, the running back out of Alabama. The owner of the team, there was a news article that came out from Rooney himself, where he basically said, I want to get back to what we were when Le'Veon Bell was there and we had a running back that can be there all three downs, catch the ball in the backfield. We need to get back to that style of football. Like, you have to have some people to block for that running back in order to get there. But listen, where there's smoke, there's a lot of fire. And I've been saying for 2 years, like, it makes a lot of just, town, blue collar, hard worker, Pittsburgh, Najee Harris. It makes sense. The pick probably should be offensive lineman 10 out of 10 times, but I think next Thursday, the first running back off of the board, we're going to hear Najee Harris at pick 24 with Pittsburgh. I think that's what they're going to do.
So Najee Harris, first back off the board, like Ray said, to Pittsburgh. Thor, are you going to sign off on that one, or you want to make an alternating case here for...
Don't sign off on it, Thor. Don't sign off on it.
Unfortunately, I have to sign off with that. But it's not that I think they're sitting 1,000% dead red on it, but it's that in this scenario, I think those rumors are totally legitimate. I think they're absolutely going to consider it, but I think it's, context dependent. And in this case, your other needs, tackle, cornerback, and interior offensive line, like Ray mentioned, you probably need a couple guys in the offensive line. But what you're probably looking at in those three positions combined is you have the 4-person bucket for tackle, right? Jenkins being the fourth, and then you have the 4-person bucket for cornerback, whether you say Newsome or Farley is, whatever. And then, Elijah Vera Tucker is like the clear dude that would also make sense here. So if those 9 guys are all off the board, I also agree with the way Ray broke it down. I think Creed Humphrey would probably make the most sense here, just in terms of build the team. But again, I think the Steelers are probably like, well, if one of those 9 guys falls to us, we're going to take them quite quickly. If they don't, I think it's going to be Najee Harris.
All right, so Najee Harris going to the Pittsburgh Steelers. So draft him first round in fantasy. What could go wrong? Just like Clyde Edwards-Helaire last year. Pick number 25. We are now to the Jacksonville Jaguars once again. Thor, you're up for this one. They already have Trevor Lawrence. Do we want to get him some more protection, or do we want to get him another weapon? What are we doing here?
Yeah, so they have very similar needs to the ancillary needs outside of Lawrence. Quarterbacks obviously off the list at this point, but to the teams that we just talked about, it's a very similar thing. Offensive tackle, we absolutely need that, but the fourth one just got taken. Cornerback is another need, but at this point, because the top four guys are off the board, you would either have to sort of reach for Asante Samuel or Elijah Molden, somebody like that. So they're in kind of a tougher type situation. I'm going to go a little bit off board here because since there's not like an obvious guy at those positions, I'm going to take Trevon Moehrig, who you're seeing more and more him put into the first round of mock drafts. He has established himself as he's the clear safety one. That's another need for Jacksonville, and I think again, like you look at these sort of buckets and what would be the best case scenario for them. Very similarly to what we were just saying, they're going to have to audible off of that, and I think that's how you get to Najee Harris with the Steelers pick. I also think that's how a guy like Moehrig can slide into this slot potentially. So I'm going to go with Trevon Moehrig.
Ray, do you think that Trevon Moehrig ascended up some draft boards because he lost the hyphenated last name? He stopped going by that so much when it came to it because no one wants like these hyphen guys. It's been just a career killer for a lot of athletes over time. I don't know why. Ask Michael Kidd-Gilchrist what that's all about. But that would be my read on the situation. Now I have terrible read. I can't read, in fact, so that's probably a bad idea. But who do you see them going with this pick?
Yeah, that was an interesting one, but definitely would fill a need for Jacksonville. I think part of the problem with that pick, Thor, I don't even know if he'll be there at 25. Like, he should be there, but you never know, right? He's clearly the top rated safety in this class, in my opinion. So I can definitely see a team, jumping up to get him or him potentially coming off of the board before this 25th pick. It's Urban Meyer. I don't know what the hell they're going to do, to be honest with you. Like, I really don't. It wouldn't even shock me if we saw two running backs come off the board back to back here. If Pittsburgh goes Najee Harris, I could see them taking a Travis Etienne, even though I think they could probably wait to the second round to do that. But for the sake of this exercise, I don't have a good reason why to pivot off of Moehrig. He's a fantastic safety prospect, and they need that in the division. So I'll say they shore up some of their defensive secondary needs, and I like the pick.
All right, so Trevon Moehrig goes to Jacksonville with their second pick of the second round. Ray, we're back to you. We're now to number 26 on the board, and everyone's favorite offseason team, the Cleveland Browns, are picking.
Man, the Browns have gone from just dumpster fire to really, really good. They have made a lot of good moves here. Recently bringing in Jadeveon Clowney to play opposite of Myles Garrett for the 11 games that Clowney will be active or at least hustling for. But I do think, that defense is coming together really well with Denzel Ward. They get a healthy Grant Delpit back. So it's almost like they've got another high draft pick coming into the 2021 season. I know a lot of people want to fantasize about more weapons on the offensive side of the ball, but I think they're fine. Bringing Hollywood Higgins back, I think that sort of was an indication that they're going to roll with Odell Beckham Jr., Jarvis Landry, Hollywood Higgins. They still have Donovan Peoples-Jones out there out wide, at least early on. Right here, I think they go back to the defensive side of the ball. And if Christian Barmore is sitting there for them as an interior defensive lineman, it makes a ton of sense to get this disruptive defensive tackle to sort of take a little bit of pressure off of Clowney, a little bit of pressure off of Garrett. And if you do decide to double Garrett and then have to spend a little extra attention chipping JV on Clowney, leaving Barmore one-on-one with a guard or center is probably not a good idea. So that just makes a lot of sense. That helps out the linebackers. It helps out the secondary. So if I were a Browns fan and Christian Barmore were sitting there and we got him at 26, I think that would be a home run selection and somebody that I can even think could go higher in the draft.
So Barmore to Cleveland with the pick, and overload a position of strength anyway. That usually turns out pretty well for a lot of teams, Thor.
Yeah, and I totally agree with the analysis there. He would make so much sense if he falls to this point. And he's the first interior defensive lineman off of the board, and he's either going to go here or just a bit above him, like Ray was saying. And in this scenario, and there's a couple other needs that linebacker, but Zaven Collins could be an audible choice. But I think again, like in the scenario where Barmore is there, I think that's an easy pick. It's a quick decision.
Okay, so let's go to Baltimore, the former Cleveland Browns, with the next one. Or do I have that backwards? No, I have that one. No. Do I have that one right? Now I can't even remember. I gotta watch that 30 for 30 again. My mind is I had kids, and now my mind is mush. It's not good. I can't remember anything anymore. Does this pass, or is this how it is?
That's what happens, man. I mean, you're asking, I got two of them. I don't know what I'm doing from day to listen. Just yes, Mayo. Kids, yes. Back to the mock, yes.
All right, so Baltimore with their pick. Ray alluded to it earlier with Lamar Jackson. Everyone's down his throat when he's not the most efficient passer of all time. I too am guilty for kind of piling on Lamar and what his ceiling might be versus some of the other quarterbacks who are just not necessarily as efficient, but can really bring you back from 21-0 if you're down in a game. It just seems like the Ravens are such a front-running team at this point, the way that they're constructed. Pretty good defense, great offensive running team, but if they need to kind of go vertical and pass, can they get it done? Maybe another weapon will help, but Thor, it's your pick for the Ravens. They love just taking good, solid defensive players when they're down in this part of the draft.
They do, and you read my mind. I'm going to go with Azeez Ojulari, who's a guy that could absolutely go a little bit above this.
Now, let me ask you, with Azeez Ansari, he might be a bit too small to play in the NFL.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, the edge rushing thing, and he fits what they do, and the type of player that they typically target. He's proven it, the biggest stages. And so just a guy who's like flashbang quick off the edge, getting after the quarterback. In terms of what he showed in college in this class, over multiple years, probably the most impressive. And certainly, athletically, checks all of those boxes as well. The Ravens this morning made some interesting news with the trade. So we're going to be talking more about that because they have another pick coming up and potentially opened a hole at tackle. But I think at this spot right here, I think Ojulari would make a lot of sense.
Ray, can you get on board with this? And I didn't even see what the Baltimore trade was at this point. So news to me.
Yeah. Or Orlando, they got rid of offensive tackle Orlando Brown, picked up an additional first rounder. And I don't know what else they got in the deal, but I know they got Kansas City's first rounder for shipping Orlando Brown off.
Yep. Okay. So what do you think that does for Baltimore in this spot, right?
Well, I think they are going to tackle an offensive lineman at some point, but I think right here, they just do a really good job of getting solid players. And Azeez is, if you haven't seen him, just turn on the tape. He pops every time you watch Georgia play. And he just fits this Baltimore feel. Like he feels like a Baltimore Raven type player. When you look at Judon, when you look at Mosley, when you look at these players, I know Mosley's not there anymore, but he fits that Baltimore role and he's an explosive athlete. So I really like that for the Ravens.
So Kansas City trades for their first round pick for Orlando Brown. So I'll make the note here to upgrade to Baltimore in the number 31 pick at this point. So we have Baltimore's first pick in. That now brings us to New Orleans. Ray, you're up with the Saints pick, and the new look Saints. This is the first time in over a decade where they seem like a different team.
This is one where I have no damn clue what to even make of what the Saints are going to do here, because although they're picking 28th, they have needs all over the place. And I think a glaring need is the quarterback position, which if there's any money, if there's any action on a dart throw quarterback being selected in the first round, Kellen Mond, Kyle Trask, I would not rule out that at New Orleans. I would not make that move. I know Saints fans don't want to hear that, but they're not committed to Taysom Hill nor Jameis Winston long-term. And quite frankly, I don't think either of those quarterbacks are the long-term answer, but I do think they're enough to fill the gap to keep New Orleans from doing that this year. But if I had a little bit of spare change in the pocket, I might throw a little action on the Saints taking a quarterback at 28. But I do think with Owusu-Koramoah off of the board. I would have loved him here at the Saints slot right here. I think they're going to go wide receiver. So I'm going to stay. I'm going to listen, Ray and hometown flavor. I think they stay in Louisiana. This is a player that, like, Thor alluded to him. He's fallen down boards a little bit because of the leg issue. But Terrace Marshall Jr., a compliment to Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara. YOLO ball, Jameis Winston just heaving it deep. That's one thing that Marshall can do. He can play down the field. He did that with Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson on the field as a true sophomore. He was one of the highest rated recruits coming out of high school. Then he got injured and fell down the rankings a little bit. But I do think the Saints need another weapon on offense opposite Michael Thomas. So right here, I'm going to go Terrace Marshall. He sneaks into the back end of the first round.
So Terrace Marshall by Ray nominated for the New Orleans Saints with this pick. Thor, if Ray is kind of right, and maybe they do want to dabble in the quarterback market, this seems like a really smart spot to trade down and try to acquire some more capital, knowing how pressed you are up against the cap. Although sometimes it feels like the salary cap doesn't even exist in the NFL because you can get out of cap hell apparently really easily by kicking the can down the road and just restructuring a little bit. But if they want to take a quarterback, it doesn't seem like anyone else after them is going to. And all the teams that would need to at the top of the second have already taken a quarterback, so they're probably not taking two. So logically, I would think trade down. But we're not going to take a quarterback with this pick. Do you think that this is the move by taking Terrace Marshall here?
So I agree that, barring something like you're talking about, a scenario like that where you trade down, maybe accrue an extra pick so you can take that shot at the quarterback, that would certainly be in play. But I think if they stay here, I agree. As far as receiver, I'm going to go with a different one just because of those Marshall rumors. But as far as like keeping him in the state and stuff like that, that would be cool. And he certainly, without those leg things, he probably go a little bit above this even. So like this could be a very good value pick. If Marshall can play through those, for his whole career. But just to put you on the spot again, Pat, a receiver that I like a bit more than Marshall is Elijah Moore from Mississippi. Just a fabulous slot receiver. Just competes. Like he's one of those guys who's like always charged up and everything like that for like a little guy. Like early in his career, it manifested in a touchdown celebration that was deemed inappropriate. But like he is again just a hardcore competitor, but explosive athleticism and really good hands. And in general ball skills for a guy that is his size. It brings in a lot. It brings in everything essentially, including can catch the ball over his shoulder, and he can go deep, which is why I talked before about the idea of failing down the spectrum. You're going to get two bites of the apple with this kid, because at the very least he's going to become one of the NFL's best slot receivers, I think, in very short order. But I also think he's got a shot to play on the outside in the same way that Antonio Brown did, similar to that. I don't know if when he gets there, if it's going to be that same, very quick transition, everything will translate, et cetera, but he's got at least the toolkit to do that. And if that doesn't work out, again, you have one of the NFL's best slot receivers. He would make a lot of sense for the Saints too. So I'll say Elijah Moore and put you to the test, Pat.
Okay. So I need a one-word answer from both of you. Thor, we'll start with you. Who is a better vertical threat between Moore and Marshall?
Marshall.
Okay. And Ray, would you have the same take on that?
Marshall.
All right. I'm going to go with Marshall with this pick because I just see if they need someone with like crisp route running, they got that in Slant Boy. So you need someone to go down the field, especially if Jameis is going to be starting. He just wants to bomb it down the field. So I will go with Ray and go with Terrace Marshall with this pick to the Saints. That puts us to Thor. You pick number 29, the Green Bay Packers, who maybe this is a spot for more.
Yes, and you read my mind. Yeah, because especially with Marshall off of the board, there's a drop, and the Packers last year, the same talk. They got to take a receiver. They got to take a receiver. Then they ended up trading up for Jordan Love, and then they didn't take a receiver the rest of the time either. So now you really have to. They can go off the reservation again if they want and just see like how much Aaron Rodgers can take before he just snaps. But instead, I think maybe we should hit him back this year, because last year we kind of stuck a knife in his back a little bit after all he did for us. And I'm going to go with Moore, who, as far as a fit for Rodgers, just fabulous. Rodgers' accuracy, and again, like the accuracy to all three levels with velocity. A kid like Elijah Moore would just absolutely destroy playing with Aaron Rodgers. I think that would be a perfect fit.
Ray, can you sign off on Elijah Moore to Green Bay at this pick?
Oh, 100%. I mean, it was between him and the only other thing I would kick is they did lose Corey Lindsley, and David Bakhtiari, wasn't healthy. I believe it was last season. And, I feel like the Packers brass are maybe it's a stick it to Rodgers thing. Maybe it's stick it to everybody who says they should have drafted a wide receiver last year, may entertain the idea of taking an offensive lineman. But ultimately, they need a second pass catching weapon opposite of Devontae Adams. Now, luckily for them, they fell into a gift last year with Robert Tonyan. So you've got Devontae Adams, Robert Tonyan at tight end, but Elijah Moore, what he does well, he's a precise route runner. He's going to be where he needs to be. And we all know how Aaron Rodgers, that's his bread and butter, be where you need to be so I can deliver the ball accurately. I think that would be a scary, scary pass catching core with Adams, Moore, Tonyan, and Allen Lazard and NVS, rotating in that stretch Z role. So I like to pick a lot, Elijah Moore.
All right, Elijah Moore to the Green Bay Packers at 29. Buffalo Bills, AFC representative in the championship game, at least. Buffalo Bills, my producer Paul's Buffalo Bills. It seems like they've got a lot figured out, and maybe they just go overload in the secondary and just try to get so good that maybe they can stop the Chiefs at some point, Ray?
Well, they got to try to stop the Chiefs, and there are some interesting connections to the pick that I have here, and it's a player that he actually measured in bigger at his pro day than I thought he was on tape. And I'm talking about Asante Samuel Jr., the quarterback out of Florida State. Buffalo, as I look at them, they don't have a ton of glaring needs. I do think another running back would be ideal, but I mean, God, are you going to take Javonte Williams here? Are you going to take Travis Etienne at this spot? I think when you pair Asante Samuel Jr. up opposite of Tre'Davious White, you've got Micah Hyde in the backfield there at safety. And Sean McDermott actually, I believe, coached Asante Samuel when he was in Philadelphia. So you've got some family lineage there with Asante Samuel. And I really like this tape. I thought, when you're talking about Florida State players, you got to scout with projection because Florida State was such an absolute how they go from winning a national title, 5, 6, 7 years ago to dog shit, one of the worst teams in college football, blows my mind. But Samuel Jr. is a fantastic talent. I think he's a good number 2 cornerback, and in a division or in the AFC where you're going to have to stop guys from throwing the ball, I think he would help out a lot opposite. And they've got Levi Wallace. He's pretty damn good as well, too. He's a solid defensive back. But I think here, getting Asante Samuel and his versatility makes some sense at pick 30.
Having upside and depth in your secondary is probably one of the best things that you can do when constructing a team, especially one that's much better than picking a running back in the spot, I would think, Thor. Plus, as I told you before, my good friend Tim Andercust wants Asante Samuel to the Jets at pick number 23. Said he's so great. So this would only logically make sense that he doesn't go to the Jets, goes to one of the Jets' rivals, and is really good against the Jets. That's how this all plays out if you follow the show.
Yeah, I think he would make sense, and I don't think it's I don't think that's outlandish. Edge would be another one. Owe and Gregory Rousseau are here. You could potentially look there. For me, though, Buffalo fits the Chiefs model when they took Edwards-Helaire. I think, when you look at teams that are going to take the running back in the first round, they're always very similar to this exact situation. And then you have the quarterback that is, he's right there on the cusp of, being in the top 5 players at his position, league, whatever. And you're doing something to try to push him over the top. We saw Buffalo, like last season, the rushing attack wasn't great. And then when, particularly when Zach Moss got hurt in the playoffs, then it was just like, they were just like, well, screw it. We're just going to pass. Josh Allen scrambling will be a rushing attack, and we're just going to throw, which is fine. But like the lack of predictability there came back to bite them a bit. And so like I think they might be looking for a running back. And Javonte Williams is not only he's my RB1, but I'm not doing this as a thing of like for what I think or whatever. Like the Bills, Javonte Williams fits, Vikings fetish with offensive line that is the athleticism. With the Bills, it's dudes that break tackles. Like their current front office, like super duper fetishize that with the running backs. But what they've done to this point is they've eschewed paying the more draft equity, and they always take that dude in the middle rounds who, like, the season before was like the PFF broken tackle leader. So 2 years ago it was Devin Singletary, who, despite being small, that season he had the most broken tackles. And then last year, Zach Moss. It was a very similar thing. But those two guys in conjunction, they still are not providing you with even a league average starter, much less a guy that, could potentially, you could see, taking your offense to the next level. Javonte Williams, he didn't just have the most broken tackles in college football last year. He broke the PFF record for broken tackles per rush. And by far, he had the most broken tackles, but like, going back, in the usage thing. And then everything else with him, he's a well-rounded back. He got nitpicked a bit before for like receiving things, which I think was unfair. He happened to play with Michael Carter at UNC, a guy that he platooned with. Michael Carter, I comp him to Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He's one of the better pass receiving backs that we've had, in the draft the past couple of years. So if you're UNC, you were going to have Michael Carter, doing that earlier in his career. But Javonte proved, as far as the receiver, he proved it. You can look at his usage, look at his tape. He's absolutely fine in that area. And once he has the ball, he becomes the berserker downfield that you see in his rushes, when he's picking through the lanes and he sticks his foot in the dirt and he's gone. Like you're going to need a couple guys to take that dude down. I think he makes a ton of sense for the Bills where they're at right now. And I also think their front office is always, sitting on dead red on these guys. And Javonte Williams is the best iteration of this that has been in the draft. I mean, you could argue, in the past decade as far as breaking tackles. So I'm going to go with him.
You make a very compelling case, but I need to do what's best for the show, Thor. And Asante Samuel going to the Bills, just so I can hear Tim say, I never liked him anyway, and he's no good, is exactly what I need. So I need this one to be right, Ray. We're going with Asante Samuel Jr. to the Buffalo Bills as the Ander-cursed pick of the mock draft, putting Thor back on the clock for the Ravens' second pick. They've already gone edge in this draft at number, what the hell was that? Number, whatever the hell they picked at, 27. Now they're picking again at number 31 after this trade. You think they have to go O-lineman now, don't you?
Yeah, but this is where it becomes weird because, with Baltimore, the offensive linemen that are still left, the tackles, there are a couple kids that I think would be okay in this slot, but they're the kind of guys that I was talking about, like the Vikings fetishizes. It's the guys with the higher RAS scores that are more of like the, zone blocker kind of guys, like Dylan Radens, being one, Samuel Cosme being another. I don't know that they fit what the Ravens look for in offensive tackles, and they certainly would be, either of those guys would be a bizarre replacement for Orlando Brown, just sort of opposite games, especially if you would have to put them on the right side for a team that has that sort of forward pound type ethos with the run game. I don't know if either of those two guys is like a clear fit for them. Back in the second round, we might have a guy that would fit more, perfectly, that we can pay less equity for. So the Ravens, as we talked about before, one of the things that they've just become known for during the draft process is taking the guy that falls to them. Particularly defenders is the joke we were making before, because it seems like every single year, like the one defender where people are like, why hasn't that guy been taken yet? Baltimore's like, come to daddy, they just take him every time. In this case, I think you can do that as well. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to address edge instead, because I don't think Radens and Cosme are fits for what they do. I'm going to go with Jayson Owuau. You could also go with Gregory Rousseau. It's two guys that I very close. Owuau is just the upside with him is so absurd because of his athleticism. He's been getting the Daniel Hunter comps, which, coming out, it was the exact same thing. It was like Daniel Hunter, like he's so athletic and the frame and everything like that and the length, like why didn't he have more sacks at LSU? Right. And so then he ends up falling to the Vikings in day two. I think, some of those guys, because some of those guys in this very similar mold, the NFL has been reliably able to give them sort of like the tool or two that they were missing. And then they start to play up. Rousseau might be, he's a different puzzle, but he's sort of on the other side of it. He's like the skyscraper that can bend as well. But he only had the 1 year production, and that was his first year starting on the edge. You played receiver, safety at high school. He's a very interesting story, but then he opted out this past season. I'm going to go with Owuau because it seems like Owuau is right there on the crest of that point where those kind of edge rushers, the projectable ones, we started to see the light turn on in a couple different facets. It seems like he is very close to just shooting up. And for the Ravens here, the juice is worth the squeeze with this slot that you're in. Owuau, maybe he should have gone a little bit before. I'll go with Jayson Owuau.
Jayson Owuau is Thor's nomination, Ray, and potentially someone who's, I don't know, a French philosopher and Rousseau. I'm not quite sure on this one. Where are you going with their pick?
Yeah, I'll just say I agree 100%. Always his ceiling, or I don't even want to say ceiling, just what he could become with solid coaching and commitment to a certain position at the defensive level is impact player, legit plug and play impact player. May never be, his ceiling could be Pro Bowl, all pro type because he's that freaky of an athlete, just size, speed, specimen. My only question would be Ravens fans aren't going to be happy that with both of these first round picks, they did not address the wide receiver position. And we keep talking about Lamar Jackson. Like the dude's throwing literally to Willie Snead and somebody that's smaller than me, at wide receiver. That's not good. That is not a winning recipe for success. And as much as we want to shit on Lamar, because he's never going to be Aaron Rodgers ever. That's not his game. But we've got to give him somebody other than Sammy fucking Watkins to throw the ball to. It's unfair to the kid to expect him to perform throwing to a 5'7", 150-pound wide receiver, the corpse of Sammy Watkins, and Willie fucking Snead. Are you kidding me? Willie Snead, and then they re-signed Nick Boyle at tight end, and I know you've got it. At some point, they've got to go wide receiver, but who are you taking here? Is it Amon-Ra St. Brown? Does he slide into the first? Rondale Moore doesn't fit that mold. He's a short wide receiver, so you've got to get somebody that's got some size that can catch some inaccurate passes. So for the sake of this exercise, where Baltimore's drafting, if a Rashod Bateman or Terrace Marshall were here, I think that would make a ton of sense for Baltimore. Because they're not here. I don't think they go wide receiver. They're not taking Kadarius Toney, and that would just put them in the same boat that they're in. So I'm not going to offer up another candidate here for this selection for Baltimore.
All right. So
yeah,
now this is just an overload at edge rusher. I like how this defense is getting built.
For sure. Yeah. And just to dovetail off the point of the receiver, I completely agree with that analysis. As far as, again, building the receiving core to the guy distributing them the ball, that seems to make sense from like a team building philosophy. And the guy who most people, the two top guys that most people would have at the top of the board at this point, it's, Rondale Moore and Kadarius Toney. Both of those guys they don't catch the ball downfield, or at least they haven't to this point. Toney did just a little bit more last year, but people need to remember he was playing with Kyle fucking Pitts and then the other side, Trevon Grimes. Like he was in a spot where, in the intermediate area, even 12 yards downfield, you were sort of in space, right? Because the defense had to keep the safeties back because Pitts was going to take the top off. But before that, in his career, it was just extended handoffs. That's all he was. And that's what Rondale Moore has done to this point too. But it's catches, it's essentially extended handoffs down the line of scrimmage or whatever. Kadarius Toney, I don't trust him, running routes down the field and then catching the ball. Like if you look at his, you can see this on tape, but you can also see it manifested in his advanced numbers. Like if you go through his PFF stuff, it's not just that, almost all of his balls that he caught in college were near the line of scrimmage, but it's also, he has very reliable hands when there's no one around him. So that thing in space, right? Just the quick hitter, he doesn't drop the ball really. But anytime he's in contested situations, his catch rate just absolutely falls through the floor. And you want to talk about like the buzzer, like the red flag or whatever. So some of these other guys, that have been sort of in that ilk. Paris Campbell, I think is a good example. We've seen various guys, whether it's from Florida or Ohio State, sort of that pecking order. We get sort of these, H-backy types, the running back, wide receiver sort of combo, but, are they good enough at either to sort of like be a stud there? I think Toney is probably, to me, he's a manufactured touch guy going forward. That's not what Lamar Jackson needs. Lamar Jackson by himself singularly stresses the defense horizontally across the line, right? right? You don't need a receiver that's doing the same thing, because that's Kadari's job. His job is to do that for a guy like Kyle Trask, right? Because then the defense has to, defend that way too, as well as down the field as well. It's a spacing thing. Neither of those guys make sense for the spacing of the Ravens' offense. They're basically Hollywood Brown, except Hollywood Brown could catch the ball down the field. And so I don't want to take the chance on either of those guys that, they'll develop that or whatever. And it doesn't make any sense for the Ravens to do that. If Bateman or Marshall were there, that's a very easy pick. But because they're not, I'm going to agree with Ray in the slot.
The champs have entered the chat, Ray, with the final pick of the first round. I feel like the Bucs are going to make the pick that helps them become the best this year, regardless of position. But who could that be?
Oh my gosh, I'm so happy that you overruled Thor with the Buffalo pick, because it allows me to drop my very uncredible, unreliable sources in the industry that I have. Very few of those unreliable sources, but I do have one that has told me that if Javonte Williams is on the board, that Tampa Bay is going to take him. And it just seems like such a Bruce Arians, Tom Brady, I don't give a shit about our positional need. We're getting players out of retirement. We're getting guys that went batshit crazy in Pittsburgh, and we're throwing them out there. Like, we'll do what we want. We're Tom Brady. It's Gronk. It's BA. It's the Kangol hat. And we're going to take Javonte Williams, even though we just resigned Leonard Fournette and brought in Giovanni Bernard, because you know what? Damn it. He fits our system. He can catch the ball. He can pass protect for Tom Brady. He can bang down the field. And we're just going to run it down your throats with Javonte Williams and Leonard Fournette. And I think that also spells good and bad for Ronald Jones. He's, this is it for his rookie deal. I could see him be traded. I don't think Giovanni Bernard, and if Ronald Jones is traded, then Gio Bernard is just a third rotational back. But from what I've heard, and it kind of makes a little bit of sense, I think they don't have a ton of needs. They have this, like you said, Mayo. I mean, hell, we're just going to do what helps us right now. And getting a running back like Javonte Williams at the back end of the first round, I'm going to roll with that. Javonte Williams, Tampa Bay here at 32.
Thor, I hope you agree with this, because I could put this in like a headline for an article, and then people will click on it and they get like really triggered about it. Like, oh, how do you know that? Like, no, I think that they could literally take any player, any position with this pick, as long as TB12 signs off on it. And this could be the move, because like Gio's brought in to pass block on obvious passing downs. And like, maybe the Fournette contract was a reward for being great in the playoffs. Was anyone really trusting Leonard Fournette? I could see it theoretically.
Yeah, I mean, we talked before about the situation that teams is, do this in general. It's a very specific kind of team, very specific kind of situation. You could argue that the Bucs are more so than any other one, right? Like, because the other examples are like the ascending teams coming up, but the Bucs, it's all the eggs are in this basket, right? Like, I believe they have all 22 starters coming back. So they just won the Super Bowl. We know they don't really have any needs. You could do, the way that this went down, for instance, you could take Gregory Rousseau, right? Keep him in state. But that's a guy that you need to work on for a couple of years. He only started for 1 year, in college. He's a raw dude. So in the couple other positions, that you would say maybe a little bit higher, sort of needs, but none of them would make sense for where the Bucs are in this moment. All the eggs are in the basket for this coming season, trying to win one more Super Bowl. They don't know how long those guys are going to stay. After that, Javonte Williams, I've tossed out running back for the Bucs as well. I don't have raised sources as far as that goes. I had tossed it out before, and some people will poo it like, oh, they have a full running back room already. It's like, okay, a full running back room. So the dude that the Jacksonville cut last year in camp, and no one wanted to give him anybody, and then the two draft busts that you've taken, Keyshawn Vaughn, he shouldn't have been a day 2 pick as is, and Ronald Jones just has not translated one-to-one his skill set from college. He makes for a solid backup, but again, the one dude that you could take here, or the one position where you could actually elevate things in a 1-year scenario, is it the analytics play? Is it the long-term play? No, it's not. It's the we want to win one more Super Bowl play. Javonte Williams would, again, I love the kid. I was talking about it before. I love the kid. For me, this would be a slam dunk kind of a running back pick in just for this situation with that kid. I think it makes a ton of sense. So I'm going to sign off on that one.
And see, analytically in the NFL, it may not work out. Analytically for this show, SEO purposes, I think it's going to work out very well. That concludes the NFL mock draft for the first round in 2021. Ray Garvin, tell everyone where they can find your work and what you're up to this week as the draft inches closer.
Yeah, appreciate you, Pat, for having me on. This is truly an honor. To both of you, respect you guys tremendously. You can find me on Twitter at RayGQ. All of my work, I'm not affiliated with, I just podcast on different shit from time to time, but I'm just an independent, I'm like the Darrell Revis. I sign 1-year deals with everybody and just cash out the next year. But patreon.com/allgas, Destination Devy YouTube channel, dropping content. I really love the college game. Like I truly love college football. I got to play a little bit of college ball. Danny Woodhead is a good friend of mine, played with him. So I just love the college game. So check me out on Patreon, YouTube, Destination Devy. Thank you guys. Thank you, Pat, for having me on.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for letting me so much of your time on this one. You can find the link to the Destination Devy YouTube channel in the description and comment section of this video and podcast. Thor, you're a busy man this type of year over at NBC Sports Edge. What do you got going on? The mock draft drops Monday?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, my 500 board, 500 player big board with 500 comps just dropped, position rankings, and then mock, into next week. So a ton of stuff happening on NBC Sports Edge. Come and check us out, and you can say hi to me on Twitter as well at Thorku, THORKU.
All right, I'm Pat Mayo. You can follow me at the PME, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Also, subscribe to the Mayo Media Network YouTube channel for all of your draft and sports betting needs. Everything up there right now. Running back profiles, wide receiver profiles, draft bets. Now we got the mock draft. We're good to go. If you're listening to the audio version, rate, review, and subscribe would help me out tremendously. Other than that, thank you all for watching. I'll see you next time.
That Mayo experience! Experience!